What you just experienced is a small glimpse into the everyday challenges of those who cannot, or have limited ability, to communicate through speech. And today, we'll explore how we can make that easier for them. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, let's go over some boring financial disclosures. I am a speech-language pathologist at Pacific Coast Speech Services. I'm also the marketing strategist for the National Stuttering Association, also known as the NSA. I am also the co-founder and co-creator of Flexspeak, a startup building AI-powered AAC through collaboration with AAC users and AI experts. None of the organizations I mentioned are paying me for my presentation. However, as a co-founder, I own equity in Flexspeak, but as a pre-revenue startup, we haven't really made any money yet, lol. Also, a personal disclosure, I am a speaking person who stutters. And I am diagnosed with ADHD. Preparing for this presentation was actually an executive functioning nightmare. Anyway, I initially thought of doing a witty intro using AAC, but I found it better to organize my thoughts using my device, so I'm going to milk this for all it's worth. All jokes aside, my use of AAC serves a double purpose. It's one of the ways I can reliably get through this presentation within my 1-hour limit. Also, it is my attempt at normalizing AAC and standing in solidarity with the AAC community. AAC users, and neurodivergent individuals as a whole, often face ableism on a consistent basis. Notions, such as AAC or stuttering being inferior or devalued forms of communication, are rooted in stigma and ableism. Similar to how I view that the world needs to destigmatize stuttering, I feel the same way about other ways of communicating, such as AAC. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. Let's get to why you're all here. Breaking barriers to AAC. I'll be switching between AAC and speaking throughout this presentation. Let's start with a quote I found really impactful. For people without disabilities, technology makes things easier. For people with disabilities, technology makes things possible. This is a quote from the IBM training manual in 1991, yet it still holds true today. Of course, it's important to note that AAC is not synonymous with technology. However, I think we can all agree that technology has become a significant part of the AAC world, and will continue to be, especially as we develop new technologies that hopefully address the unmet needs of those who lack access to robust language-based AAC. With the advent of artificial intelligence, this poses many new possibilities for AAC. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that later. I have the great privilege of working at a special education site with primarily non-speaking and semi-speaking students, from junior high to adult transition. I can't work with any populations younger than that. If I spoke in Mudurese for more than 5 minutes, I'd self-destruct. Anyway, while I feel so fortunate to be working closely with non- and semi-speaking students, I quickly came to realize that there are many barriers that these individuals face. Now, we've all heard stories of AAC devices that end up unused, collecting dust. We often call it device abandonment. And as a field, we have a narrative about this. That we are the experts. We know the effective tools and technologies. All of the barriers are over there, on the right side of the screen, such as support staff and family not implementing AAC and supporting communication, or the AAC user just isn't bought in or motivated. But let me share a perspective from Communication First, the only disability-led nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting and advancing the rights and interests of those who cannot rely on speech alone to be heard and understood. Why are we blamed for not using AAC systems, instead of the professionals, technology, and supports around us? Calling this abandonment places the burden on us, instead of on the structural issues that made us unable to use the system. Now, this part can feel uncomfortable. Some proportion of those quote-unquote abandoned devices were just simply the wrong device for that child and their family. So, who's making these recommendations? Often, it's us, the professionals. And if we're new to AAC or only know 2 or 3 types of devices well, we might not always make the best recommendation. I know I haven't been perfect either as a clinician. I'm not saying this to shame or pin blame, but to ignite a fire within us to do better as a field, myself included. Here's a crazy statistic. Did you know that it takes an average of 17 years for an evidence-based practice to be incorporated into general practice? And only about half of those practices reach widespread usage. Absolutely insane. Now here's the interesting part of this quote. The challenge is even greater in the AAC field, due to the lack of AAC competencies among service providers. This suggests that AAC competencies aren't solely for AAC users, it also applies to us as service providers. I often imagine what it's like being in the shoes of a non-speaking person without access to robust AAC. Then I reflected on my experience as a person who stutters, and the frustration of being hung up on because they think there's no one on the other line. Or not being able to order exactly what I want to eat. Now this is incomparable to the experiences of non-speaking individuals. However, it's best if you don't hear it from me, but from a full-time AAC user herself. You can watch the rest of this video on Communication First's website, which I will link at the end of the presentation. Now here's the reality that most AAC users face, told by Communication First. Quick trigger warning, one of these points deals with the sensitive issue of abuse. Please take care of yourselves and feel free to step out or disengage if needed. Although the field of AAC has existed for more than 40 years, it has yet to make much of a change in our lives. Most of us still lack access to robust language-based AAC. Most of us are segregated from the rest of society. Most of us are denied meaningful educational and employment opportunities. Most of us live in poverty. Most of us have almost no agency, autonomy, or decision-making power over our own lives. Most of us will be abused at least once in our lifetimes. We still do not have very effective tools that allow most of us to be understood. We also continue to be routinely excluded and isolated from society and denied educational, social, living, and employment opportunities that our peers without expressive communication disabilities enjoy. The reasons for this are widespread discrimination, ableism, and bias and misperceptions about us. I don't mean to make this such a heavy topic, but this is a really important topic to shed light on. I want to let us all know that, as service providers, we can play a crucial part in making communication more accessible for these individuals.
Now I'll be transitioning to speaking. So earlier this year, I decided to connect with an online community of startup founders. And then I connected with a software engineer. His name is Michael Jameson. He's a software engineer with a background in nursing. And we wanted to talk to AAC users and figure out what gaps we can address, potentially in a new technology or application. So I looked through the literature, and a lot of it just kind of reiterated the things that we already knew about AAC abandonment. But more importantly, we went out and we spoke with AAC users and their families. And then we started mapping out areas that we wanted to address. So here's what we're prioritizing as we're designing and developing new AAC technology. The first thing is what we call in the tech world UX and UI. So this stands for user experience and user
interface. So basically UX or user
experience is just your overall experience while you're interacting with a digital product. And UI are just basically all the things that you see and interact with, things that you can visually observe on a digital product like a website or an application. But before we go into how we achieve good UX, UI, I'd like us to start off with a concrete example of bad UX, UI. So I'd like everyone to just scan this QR code on your phone, or you can manually enter in the URL as well. It's a user-in-your-face.com. And I'd like you to all just take 1 minute to try to get past the login page. This is kind of like an interesting puzzle piece. You can explore this later. But how did you all feel? How did you feel while you're interacting with this UI? It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. You just kind of gave up, right? Anyone else? Confused. Confused. That's a big one.
How did that home go?
What? I'm sorry?
Because this happens all the time.
It happens. That's right. Is there with a particular website or something that? It's all the time. Right. Okay, great. Yeah. So I'd like to use this as like empathy building for a lot of the parents and non-clinical people that we work with when we ask them to use these AAC applications. This is a perspective from a parent. His name is Matt, and he's one of our product testers. And he shared this about an experience that he had with one of the existing applications that he's been using.
That is confusing as hell for trying to do things. It's got like 100 different actions. Like, I don't know what the hell this are. I don't know where to look these things up other than like a 200-page PDF that they have. And it was like, oh my God, I'll like copy a button or I'll put in I'll do the same actions. I'll look up the actions of one thing and I'll try to replicate that in the new button that I added, and it doesn't do it. But then if I copy the button, then it'll do the act. But a lot of it is like, it's very unintuitive in how it's set up. And I think that's one of the complaints I've heard about all of the speech devices, that they're all very unintuitive. With Flexspeak, it was a lot easier to try and figure out like how to do some of those things.
And Matt isn't the only parent that mentioned this. One other quote that really stood out from our conversations with parents of AAC users is this. They said, I feel that most AAC systems out there are geared towards clinicians. Not many of them are geared towards caregivers and families like us. So that was something that really molded our perspective as we approach this. So we wanted to address these pain points that families experience, because if they are bought in and if it's easy for them to use these technologies, then it's easier for them to implement them at home. It's easier for them to buy into using these technologies. And then we can reduce these barriers to providing access to communication, to robust communication to these students with complex communication needs. Now, what happens when we're finally able to give access to robust AAC in all settings? Well, of course, this is kind of commonsensical to us, but we need to make it motivating for them, right? Motivation is one of the 4 psychosocial factors in AAC competencies, a framework that's been created by Janice Light and her colleagues. And she also says that a person is more likely to take on demands when they're motivated. So, of course, we know that we need to add motivating items and phrases and activities into their AAC systems, but I'm not sure if you've experienced this before, but have you ever had a student transfer to your site or fly up and let's just say they had a certain application like LAMP or something like that, but you've noticed that it only has all the default words and there's no custom words that are related to their interests and their motivations. So we see this all the time at my work site, and my coworkers do as well, right? And here's the reality. Lingraphica did a survey, and they said that nearly half of speech-language pathologists find complex customization a barrier. So this is the reality that we face, right? We have large caseloads. We have 60 to 70 plus at my work site, okay? We have a lack of time. And on top of that, a lot of these things are not very intuitive, especially if they come up with an application that we're not familiar with. Now, if only there was some groundbreaking technology that could streamline this entire process. And I think a lot of you can kind of see where I'm getting at here. So AI and AAC. This has been a pretty hot topic for the past, I don't know, since the beginning of this year, really. So what is AI, right? AI stands for artificial intelligence, and it's essentially the capability of a machine to imitate human intelligence, or at least handle tasks that would normally require human intelligence. And I can go into all the technical components of AI, like reasoning, computer vision, etc. But I do just want to hone in on two components of AI that I find to be very pertinent and relevant to what we'll be discussing today. And that's machine learning and natural language processing. So machine learning is a component of AI that gives computers the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed. So in other words, it's basically learning from experience. So these machines can learn from experience. The more that they interact with the user, the more that you use it, the more that it understands your own communication style, your behaviors, etc. And natural language processing is another component of AI that gives computers the ability to interpret, manipulate, and comprehend human language. And something that's really interesting is that it can also understand context. So what you have already said, or anything that you've already typed, it can remember the context of what you said. Now, the concept of integrating AI into AAC isn't really a new one. In 2019, Michael Sennett published a paper exploring the opportunities and considerations of integrating AI into AAC. Now, back then, I believe it was, well, first off, who here has used ChatGPT before? Okay. Who here has not used ChatGPT yet? Okay. Yeah, so right now we're using the model GPT-4. Back then, it was still GPT-2, and it was a lot less evolved than how it is today. Now, I'll show you a quick example of what ChatGPT can do, if this video loads.
I'm going to write up a prompt, and then ChatGPT is going to give me a response. Okay, so it says, write a poem for Closing the Gap conference attendees about my appreciation for them attending my presentation. And then it generates a poem, as you see here. The cool thing about this is that I shared a little bit about me and Flexspeak, the project that I'm working on. So it has context into who I am, what I'm working on. Even when I create a new chat, it already understands certain information about me and Flexspeak. So it says, in a room full of voices, buzzing and loud, I see your faces, a wonderful crowd. You've come to listen, to learn, and to know about Flexspeak's mission, a passion we show. So let's close the gap as together we strive to ensure that each voice is vibrantly alive. Thank you, dear attendees, for sharing this space. You make this world listen at a more caring pace.
All right, it's gonna get pretty dark and intimate in here. Awesome, thank you so much. So I'd like to introduce you to one of our product testers, Enzio. Enzio goes by any neopronouns. Enzio's also a multiply disabled and neurodivergent AAC and mobility aid user. And Enzio says this.
Would really benefit AAC users. There's so many ways to use AI while still respecting privacy. AI could make adding words to AAC quicker, make vocabularies more robust, and help schools and SLPs to not take away words, but instead add more.
So that's what we set out to do. We're experimenting with this new feature called quick folders. So it's AI-powered customization for symbol-based AAC. And I'll show you real quick how that looks like. And then we use AI to recommend a list of words, and you can multi-select all the words that you can add to this folder. So say it's a context-based folder. And you can add multiple words all at once. Now, this is something that not only is meant for parents, but AAC users who can program their own devices. So Enzio is a mobility aid user, so it's not as efficient for Enzio to add in these words. So this has been a feature that has been helpful because it's way more efficient to customize and add and personalize your own AAC system. Janice Light also says that systems must be appealing and easy to use. So with more appeal and ease of use, you can get more buy-in from the AAC user. You can promote peer interaction. However, she also stated that many AAC systems do not appeal to younger generations, and instead they reflect the mental models, and in her words, not mine, middle-aged SLPs and engineers. So here are some examples of AAC systems in 2005. Who was around when they were implementing these in the field? Now, here are some examples of AAC systems now. And I'm not saying this to knock on Speak for Yourself or LAMP. You know, we use this every day at our site, and this has enabled communication for many of our students, right? And building software, it's not an easy task. So hats off to anyone who's building to serve the AAC community. Now, let's compare them to appealing, well-designed applications, right? So on the left, you have YouTube Kids. In the middle, we have Duolingo. And on the right, of course, we have TikTok. So why is there such a difference in design when we compare these AAC systems to well-designed, modern applications? So I think this can be best explained through a certain process or methodology that was used prior to the mid-2010s. And this is called the waterfall methodology, where a lot of these earlier companies, they implemented this approach. Okay, so at first, they did extensive research and development, and then they wrote out all the requirements that's needed in this product that they're making. And typically, these were heavily influenced by the perspectives of speech-language pathologists, researchers, and engineers, because they're viewed as the experts of communication and technology. So once this process has been completely done, it's been completely finished, then they moved on to design. And the design was primarily focused on function. As long as it does the thing that we need it to do, then it's a product that we want. It's a product that works, right? So there wasn't as much of an emphasis on human-centered design, intuitive, human-centered design. Then afterwards, they would go out and build a comprehensive set of features, and then you went into testing. So we did clinical trials, doing clinical trials, publishing peer-reviewed articles, kind of proving the efficacy of these systems that they created. And then after that, it goes into maintenance. So fixing bugs, maintaining things. If they're going to add any features, it's mostly based on long-term data. So there are pros and cons about this approach, right? So the pros are it's expert-driven. You know, it offers robust, well-researched AAC systems. And of course, you have a lot of buy-in from institutions and speech-language pathologists because they're molded around the perspectives of these individuals. And I will say this, you know, because so much research has been done on these AAC systems, now we know that AAC is effective, right? But there are also cons. So a lot of features can lead to complexity, and it could lead to an unintuitive UI, all right? Because especially if it's so focused on function, it could lead to, you know, more complex, unintuitive UI. And additionally, there's a lack of input from AAC users and their families during the initial development, which could contribute to a lack of buy-in or a high abandonment rate of these systems. And additionally, it's hard to change anything after you launch, because after you launch, people have already gotten accustomed to these interfaces. So it's usually very, very hard to change the interface of an application after it's launched. Now, here's what Enzio has to say about incorporating input from AAC users in the design of new technologies.
Including AAC users in the design and feedback for new apps is so important. After all, we are the ones using it.
Now, I'd like to introduce you to Aiden. She's a co-founder and head of UX UI at Hound. Hound is an HR platform for vet clinics. She's also one of our advisors. She identifies as neurodivergent, being diagnosed with ADHD. And she's worked with a lot of top-tier brands like Red Bull, L'Oreal, Nestle, and National Geographic. And she says this: if you don't engage with your true users, you're likely operating on biases. And products developed based on these biases are often short-lived and eventually abandoned by users. One second. Okay, so she guides us on what her field calls lean UX, but basically it's just this iterative user-centric design process. And how it begins is we start prototyping by just talking to AAC users and their families, seeing what things they wanted to prioritize. And we also use new evidence-based principles and design practices to make it feel more modern and intuitive. And then afterwards, we would go into this feedback loop, or this cycle of just giving it to AAC users and their families, getting their feedback, and then we either build new features based on that feedback, or we improve our features, our existing features, based on that feedback. Then we go on and then we test it, and then we get more feedback, and it's just this constant cycle of iteration and feedback. And yeah, I mean, in the SLP world, we might call this ongoing dynamic assessment. So during, while we've talked to all of our users, we've also noticed some very prominent pain points. And one of these is inefficiency. So let me illustrate the issue here a bit more. So AAC users, they average about between 3 to 12 words per minute, okay? And non-AAC users, we can communicate at an average of around 155 words per minute. So there's this drastic asymmetry that's required in the time required to communicate, right? And this can impact our social interactions quite a bit. If you've ever spoken to or communicated with an AAC user, you can feel the tension as you're waiting for them to construct their next message, right? They feel the pressure to respond quickly, and oftentimes they feel frustrated with the length of time needed to compose a message. I can relate to this, at least to some degree. It's very frustrating for me to even just experience a block in my speech, right? But even then, it's just a few grueling seconds before I can get onto the next word. And a lot of AAC users don't even experience the privilege of getting to this next word. So this is relatively new research that has come out in 2019 by Janice Light and her colleagues. I like to call her the AAC queen if you're familiar with her work. So they found that spatial cues have been shown to increase speed and accuracy of finding a target on grid displays. Now, what are spatial cues, right? It's essentially clustering together words or symbols on the basis of some shared feature, right? So it could be internal symbol color, button color, semantic feature, etc. And on the left here, you have a traditional row-column arrangement that you see in a lot of existing symbol-based systems. And then on the right side, you have a spatially cued display. So I'm just curious, what do you notice about the grid, about the display on the right side? Color-coded. Okay, so it's clustered by some shared feature, right? Anything else? Yeah, it feels less overwhelming. Okay, why is that? Why? Exactly, yes. So there's extra space in between each cluster, right? Exactly. And so they found that this helps exploit principles of visual processing to help find the target word a lot more efficiently. And they've found that this could potentially be a good way to introduce AAC. And then as time goes on, as they become more familiar, you can fill in these gaps with more words. So that's how we can target that using design. And that's essentially what we've done with Flexspeak. So we've clustered together words based on some shared features. So we have button colors, and we also have they're also categorized, right? And that's the design principle that we're implementing, and we're continually working with our users to improve on the design of Flexspeak. Now, AAC users also ask this. They ask, how do we develop AAC? The battery just had a lot of technical issues today, but hopefully you can all hear me. Right? How do we develop AAC that will allow me to communicate as quickly as my friends who do not have speech disabilities? So Google did a couple studies here on AI-powered AAC, and they looked into this feature, what they called abbreviation expansion. So essentially, you're turning brief user inputs into complete sentences using the assistance of AI, large language models, which is essentially AI. And they found that this was able to reduce keystrokes by up to 77%. So this is obviously a significant difference in the amount of time that it's needed to construct a message. And participants also said that they valued reducing the amount of effort to communicate. However, they did share some concerns about autonomy and personalization. Like, I want to make sure that this is exactly my personality, this is my communication style that is going through, and even like my tone of voice. Like, one user said that they felt that the output felt too sterile. Normally they have more of a positive, witty humor that they infuse into the things that they say, and this was just kind of missing that element. Now, I just want to give a quick shout out to Augie. Augie is an AI-powered text-based AAC created by Owen Megger, who's the founder of Enabo, and he's an AAC user with cerebral palsy. And in this AAC app, there's this feature called phrase prediction, which analyzes phrases in a specific folder and predicts relevant phrases associated with that. So let's see here. But yeah, you can find this on the App Store as well, and I believe on their website they have a few other applications that are designed by him and other collaborators in the disability community. And of course, this is designed to streamline communication, so you can tell that this is something that the AAC community wants to prioritize, is efficiency. So how do we implement this in, well, what one of our users coined a hybrid text symbol-based AAC system. This is because in Flexspeak, we try not to only cater towards solely symbol-based AAC users, but we also try to cater towards text-based AAC users as well, because a few of them have reached out and said, hey, we find it really frustrating to be typing up every single letter, and we want something that's that can kind of meet us in the middle. And we created this feature that a lot of our users are really excited about. It's called message prediction. So essentially, the user types in a brief message, such as a single word or a short phrase, and they have the option to either speak the message as is or use AI-powered message prediction. And then if they opt for to use AI, then the AI-generated phrase is first displayed to them. And this is kind of this is where we go into what we call the user validation layer. So the user can validate, edit the output to exactly how they want it, and then they can speak it once they're done making those edits. So I'll show you how that looks.
Okay, so users can construct a telegraphic message, such as a brief phrase, like a single word or a partial phrase.
Cookie.
And then if they opt to use AI, it can auto-complete, or it can predict what the user is intending to say. And they can even make any edits to their output as well.
I don't want a cookie.
Right. So that's just an example of how our message prediction feature works.
We've also gotten some feedback from families as well, and Matt shared a bit more about what he thinks about this feature.
The things that I've been excited about for Flexspeak has been that, because using the AI and being able to kind of fill in the words, because one of the things that's been frustrating has just been the training of where it's like some teachers were like, no, you have to get every word so it's exactly the proper sentence. And it's like, so of course, for her, she's like, well, this is too much. I quit.
Right.
Like, I already said what I want to eat. I just didn't write it in the full sentence. And so it's like that bad.
I imagine Matt's daughter often feels like this, as well as many of our other students, right? And it says, when you just told them that what you wanted, but they tell you to say it in the full sentence. So try not to be that service provider that makes your students feel like Ben Affleck right here. Then we go into what's called identity-related features. So communication first defines identity-related features as these, right? Maybe more voices so then we can sound different from each other. Adding emphasis and inflection options so then when we can communicate with more emotions.
Hey everyone, I hope you're learning a lot from this presentation. This is an example of an AI-powered text-to-speech voice. I hope this gets you excited about the future of AAC. And remember, don't stop until every voice is heard.
Hey everyone, I hope you're learning a lot from this presentation. This is an example of an AI-powered text-to-speech voice. I hope this gets you excited about the future of AAC. And remember, don't stop until every voice is heard.
This is some really exciting stuff. The only thing is it requires very advanced hardware to be able to produce these voices in real time. So it takes about like 30 seconds to a minute even to produce one of these. We're continuing to explore these options with our AAC users. Okay. And then they also wanted to prioritize the ability to code switch, code mix, or use multiple languages. So 1 out of 5 Americans speak a non-English language at home. And there's increasing diversity of individuals who require AAC. And the 5 most common languages in the US are English, Spanish, Mandarin or Cantonese, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. However, most popular AAC apps are only available in English, Spanish, and French. There's this exclusion of Asian languages, and this can be problematic, right? I spoke with an SLP that I know who's based in Taiwan, and she says that not a lot of SLPs over there use these AAC applications because they're not available in their language. Additionally, these systems cost quite a bit of money, and the cost of living over there is very different than how it is over here, so it's not very accessible from a financial standpoint. Now, some even charge an extra $50 to $150 to access certain languages like Hebrew and Arabic, and this can be a barrier and exclude certain communities. It's not like, well, first of all, they didn't ask to be non-speaking or semi-speaking, and they didn't ask to come from a different culture either, right? So this again can be a barrier. Now, I do have a spreadsheet of languages available in different applications, so you can kind of use this almost like a feature matching spreadsheet to make sure that you can provide access to your student's home language, and I can share that at the end of this presentation. So I initially wanted to share verbally the story behind how we started adding more languages into Flexspeak, but I figured I'd use some multimedia AAC to share this. So the caption says, making a multilingual AAC app is too difficult. Since you're a small team and you don't have a lot of funding, just focus on English-speaking users. And this is what we heard a lot from business consultants and startup consultants. So within 6 months, while we're simultaneously building all these other features, we've also added the following languages, such as Spanish, Mandarin, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, Turkish, Hebrew, and we just added Nepali just 2 days ago. So really exciting stuff here. And I want to end by sharing some perspectives from AAC users. We asked Enzio a couple of questions, and this is what Enzio said.
What are the advantages and challenges of using AAC in social situations?
I am semi-speaking, so a lot of people who I use AAC around have heard my voice. Sometimes it's nerve-wracking because a lot of people think that if you can speak, then you should focus on speaking. However, AAC has enabled me to communicate more clearly. AAC has been life-changing, even if I used to talk a lot.
What's something you'd like educators and SLPs to know about working with AAC users?
I want educators and SLPs to know that even speaking people can benefit from AAC. AAC is for everyone. Even texting is a form of AAC, and most people I know text.
And this next point has to do with multimodal communication. I'm sure a lot of us know what that means, but communication can entail the use of no-tech or just use of gestures, use of low-tech communication boards or high-tech communication systems. And this is what Michael B. Williams from Communication First said, and I quote, one second, and I quote,
No one communication mode, no AAC device, no low-tech board, no gestures, signs, or speech could possibly meet all my communication needs all of the time. I use multiple communication modes. I communicate in many ways. I select the best mode depending on the location, with whom I am communicating, and the purpose and content of the communication. I suggest that everyone needs more than one way to communicate.
And I'd also like to highlight that multimodal communication can also mean using multiple applications to meet your communication needs. I feel like a lot of us can kind of get tribalistic with just saying, oh, I like this application, so this is the application that they should be using all the time. But I'd like to share something that Enzio posted, and the caption reads, guess what? AAC users can use multiple apps and change what apps they use over time. Here's a video showing the apps that I use. So yeah, this makes me think of one of the students that I work with, and he came to our site using LAMP, and he was a rock star at it, actually. But he saw a lot of his peers using Speak for Yourself, and then he started kind of gesturing, kind of indicating his interest in using Speak for Yourself. So we downloaded that on his device, so now he has access to both. And he's a rock star at both now, and he's able to switch between these two applications. So I think that's something that is important to highlight. So he's able to use multiple applications, just like how Enzio uses Flexspeak, in addition to all of these other applications. Now, here are some final words before we move into Q&A.
Now, I'm not saying that we're perfect, or that we figured it all out at Flexspeak. We've only been around for a little over 6 months, and there's still so much to learn and figure out. We're not trying to sell a product. We're trying to sell a vision that we can create an AAC solution co-led by the efforts of the disability community that addresses at least some of their unmet needs. Ultimately, I hope this instills optimism for the future of AAC. Thank you.
Out of beta. We don't want to. I cannot give a definitive date yet, but I'd say that we are getting quite close. I want to say that maybe by the end of the year we can have it out, and even right now you can apply to become a beta tester. We don't charge for during our beta testing period. We don't want to charge until we know that we can provide value to the AAC community. And even then, it gets a little tricky because, I mean, a lot of AAC users have reached out, or like a handful have reached out to us. And earlier, I mentioned that many of them live in poverty, right? So how do we make it accessible enough? This is something that we really have to balance. It has to be like this fine line, while also making sure that we can afford certain things like cloud storage and access to these AI language models. So it's been like a fine balance, but we've been giving free access to AAC users who just at least need something. But yeah, anyway, to answer your question, hopefully by the end of the year we can have our public launch.
What platforms are you planning to use your app on?
Oh, great questions, I love it. Yes, so I know that a lot of apps right now, they're only available in the iOS ecosystem. So we had to be very selective as to which code languages and platform we use. So we knew that we didn't only want to launch in the Apple ecosystem, so we'll be launching on Android. It'll be accessible on web browsers as well. Yeah. So right now it's only available on iPad, or it's formatted only on iPad, and then next is iPhone, and then Android, and then web browser. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes? No.
All of the text-based features, like the message prediction and all that, can you access that within the symbol-based program that you have, or is it two different applications?
No, those are within the same application. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.